Welcome to the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randle and Gus Kearns.
Before Virginia cornered the market on successful, slow-paced, defensive-oriented college basketball teams, there was Wisconsin. Not surprisingly, Wisconsin really became a major player in the college basketball landscape under Tony Bennett, the head coach of Virginia's father, Dick Bennett, back in the late 90s. In his 6 seasons at Wisconsin, Bennett reached the NCAA tournament 3 times, including a magical Final Four run back in 1999-2000. Next came Bo Ryan, who made the NCAA tournament each and every year of his 16 years coaching Wisconsin, including 4 Sweet 16s, 2 Final Fours, and an NCAA championship game runner-up finish in 2014-2015 to the Duke Blue Devils. Bo Ryan started the 2015-2016 season as head coach and then quickly stepped down, and Greg Gard took over, and that year they also made the Sweet 16. The following year in 2016-2017, Gard also made the Sweet 16 with Wisconsin. So the Badgers were basically on a roll. They had arrived under Dick Bennett. They had taken off under Bo Ryan, and they had just continued the magic under Greg Gard. But something they hadn't done since the 2014-2015 season under Bo Ryan was win the Big Ten regular season title, which is why this year, this roller coaster of a year for the Wisconsin Badgers that ended up with a share of the Big Ten regular season title with a road win at Indiana at Assembly Hall was so very impressive. The Badgers season was like a roller coaster the entire year. Did not start off well with 3 consecutive non-conference losses to Richmond, New Mexico, and NC State. And then when things started going right, there was the whole Kobe King leaving the program incident. So I'm sure Badger fans didn't know what to expect. But they ended the year winning 9 of 10 and on an 8-game winning streak, finished 21-10, 14-6 in the preeminent conference in college basketball this season. And so it's a very important team we have today on the Screener podcast season review series, which is why we're going to bring in Jim Polzin from the Wisconsin State Journal to give us the insight into the Wisconsin Badgers program preseason, during the season, and now looking ahead to 2020-2021, which, by the way, looks pretty darn strong. And if you're following our season review series, you heard Zach Osterman talk to us about the Indiana Hoosiers. When I asked him who he thought the favorite was, he said next year it's going to be Wisconsin, bringing back a ton of players, a great recruiting class, and Greg Gard finally breaking through and taking the mantle officially from Bo Ryan, from Dick Bennett, with a Big Ten regular season title. And now, next year, the Wisconsin Badgers are going to look to make some noise in the NCAA tournament. They're not talking Sweet 16. They're looking beyond. And they'd love a back-to-back and a belly-to-belly Big Ten regular season title for their Badger fans. So we're going to talk to Jim Polzin, great writer for the Wisconsin State Journal, covers University of Wisconsin men's basketball. Follow him on Twitter at Jim Polzin WSJ. We're going to bring him in now. Our season recap series continues. It's Wisconsin Badger time. The Screener season review series rolls on, and we head to Big Ten country to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. The Badgers with a tremendous season. They have a lot of players returning. So not only were they great this season, but it looks like they're going to be very strong next year as well. And we bring in Jim Polzin from the Wisconsin State Journal to talk all things Wisconsin basketball and give us a few minutes here on the Badgers. Follow him on Twitter at Jim Polzin WSJ. Jim, thanks for joining the podcast. Really appreciate a few minutes. Are you staying safe? How you doing in Wisconsin?
Doing well here. It's been a weird spring, as we all know, but staying safe, staying healthy so far.
Yeah, definitely. And listen, we're trying to give a distraction here about the college basketball season. No Final Four, no NCAA tournament, but certainly was a successful one for the Badgers, who ended up getting a share of the Big Ten regular season title. So take me through it. Beginning of the year, coming into this year, what were your thoughts on the team? What were Badger fans expecting? How'd you think this season was going to go when we started back in November?
Mike, I think I picked them to finish sixth in the Big Ten. I'd have to go back and look, but I think that sounds about right. I just didn't know. The great unknown was how would things look in life after Ethan Happ. Happ had been a 4-year starter, left school as one of the all-time leaders in points, rebounds, assists, pretty much every major statistical category. He was the guy the offense ran through the last 2 years he played. It was just going to be a big difference. I think there were reasons for optimism that they could put 5 shooters on the floor and they wouldn't be so perimeter-based. They're very Ethan Happ-centric for 2 seasons, and I think there was some hope that this offense would be better and more space available, and you could kind of run the traditional swing type offense that this program had run for years and was good at. So that was the optimistic view, but I think everybody knew that Happ was a sensational player on both ends of the court. And there'd be a lot of holes to fill. And also Cleo Iverson was probably their best perimeter defender. He was a senior 2 seasons ago. So I think they knew there were a lot of holes to fill, and what parts would step in and make up for those losses was really important. But I thought they'd be an NCAA tournament team, but I didn't really think they challenged for a Big Ten title. So what they did surprised me.
Yeah, and they changed their flow, their offensive structure. Kaminsky, that tremendous team. I love that team so much with the big man inside. And of course, Ethan Happ, like you said, had been so dominant and such a strong player for them. Coming in this year, you had Nate Reavers and a bunch of guys, but really, so like you said, a different structure that maybe was guard oriented to a certain extent.
Yeah, and that was one of the concerns, was because they're returning guards, Dimitri Trice and Brad Davison. 2 really good players, had struggled shooting the end of their sophomore seasons. I mean, the 2018-19 season, this team lost in the first round to Oregon in the NCAA tournament. And those 2 guys especially really struggled to knock down shots. So for all of the times I would write stories saying that this offense could be better, I think I got, a lot of people were scoffing at that because, the idea that this could be a good shooting team was a little bit, there was some skepticism there because, 2 of their supposedly best shooters had struggled down the stretch. So, you kind of had to go into the season with a lot of assumptions. The assumption that Trice and Davison would kind of get back to shooting the way they could. A guy like Kobe King, who I'm sure we're going to talk about, he was a guy that people were anticipating would make a big jump. And, that was one of the assumptions that had to be made. Reavers would have to make another positive step, and Aleem Ford would have to, get back to playing the way he could. So there was a lot of ifs going into the season. And another one was Micah Potter, who, wasn't eligible. They're fighting for his eligibility. He ended up, not getting that eligibility waiver, and he had to sit out the first 10 games of the season, which in retrospect, I think kind of delayed this team's development to some extent. So there were just a lot of questions, a lot of ifs, and by the end of the season, the team was playing its best basketball, but it just took a while to get there.
Yeah, I thought what was interesting with the Badgers is typically a team in a Power 5 conference that makes a run, and they ended the season on a fantastic run, 8 consecutive wins. Usually they are bolstered by a strong non-conference. Like you said, maybe it was Potter, who I thought had a huge impact when he became eligible. But really, I would say in that non-conference part of the schedule, right, they ended up, before they hit that first game against Indiana, they were just 4-4. They were coming off a 3-game losing streak to Richmond, New Mexico, and NC State. So sort of surprising that it looked like they struggled early, but then as the season went on, they became tremendous.
Yeah, the crazy thing early on was I went into the season thinking, one of the reasons I was optimistic about this team was I just looked and thought, hey, they can put 4 or 5 shooters on the court. What are the odds of everybody being cold at once? I just thought this team to some extent was drought proof, and I was proven very wrong. I mean, the trip out to Barclays in New York for that tournament was ugly. The loss to New Mexico and Richmond, the team shot terrible, and everybody was cold at once, and it kind of made you wonder about this team. But I do think I think part of it was a team that was kind of trying to find itself and who was going to step up, and everybody kind of had to have a bigger role. And I think there was a little bit of a growing period where they were, just getting comfortable in those new roles. And then, like I said, getting Potter back was huge. Even if you take away what Potter can do offensively as a rebounder, everything else, and just being an extra body, I think the biggest thing his presence meant was that Nate Reavers didn't have to play so much. I mean, Reavers was a guy who played 40 plus minutes in the opener against St. Mary's. That game went to overtime. It's just way too many minutes. And what the coaching staff kind of learned throughout this process was that Reavers is at his efficient best when he plays 26, 27 minutes. And he just couldn't do that before Micah Potter was eligible because they didn't have any quality backups to him. And Reavers had to play way more minutes than he should and ended up getting tired and not playing as efficiently as he could. So getting Potter back just from that standpoint, just from having an extra big body that they could keep Reavers at a more manageable minutes load was important. And then, like I said, I don't want to underplay what Potter meant because he's a tremendous shooter, a tough guy. I think they did lack some toughness and some energy off the bench, and Potter gave him that, and ended up being probably the best rebounder and best 3-point shooter in terms of averages. So his addition in late December, I think, meant a lot. Now, it took a little bit while for him to get comfortable in the system and for the players around him to get comfortable with him. But again, like I said, once February hit, this team caught its stride.
They really did, and I got to see a lot of Wisconsin games because obviously they're a high-level team, and I was impressed with them with some of these games. I was impressed with the home win over Marquette early in the season. And then the one that turned my head, I would say that, and I'm curious, Jim, to get your take on it, sort of the pivot point for me, Potter had just come back, like you said, was the Tennessee game away. And when they won that game in dominant fashion on the road, because people were saying, how is Wisconsin going to play on the road? Social media was saying, they struggle on the road. They're coming off the loss to Rutgers, which, of course, Rutgers was a very good team at the time. We didn't realize how good they were. That game changed it because I think from that point on, beat Rider at home, then you beat Ohio State away, 1 point loss to Illinois, but really got going after that. I think that was maybe, from an outsider point of view, a real turning point for him.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Mike, because I think a lot of people would say that Ohio State game on January 3rd was kind of the moment where you kind of thought, this team could be something, but I agree with you. The Tennessee win was big, mainly because, like you said, they hadn't won on the road yet. They had not won away from the Kohl Center. And there was just kind of this, every loss, it would just be a storyline that, hey, this team is good at home, great at home even, and completely opposite on the road. And I think you just had to get over that. I think this team had to get over that and get that, put that behind them. And so going into Tennessee and playing really well, shooting well, winning that game by 20 points, I think was kind of the moment where they said, all right, the road saga is not as much of a storyline anymore. We can win anywhere we play. And I think they took off from there. And Potter, like if you look at the stat, that box score, Potter didn't do much that game. He was in foul trouble.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, but again, like I just think that game was big for their confidence. And then, like I said, they went into Ohio State, a top 5 team at the time, and won that game. It was not pretty by any means, but they won that game. And I think that's when they started believing that, hey, this team can, be a top 4, top 5 team in the Big Ten. They won at Penn State during that run. And then, I think things kind of changed in late January, which I'm sure we can get into. But I do think that late December, early January, those wins were important for this team's psyche.
Yeah, and let's get into it now. So Kobe King, highly regarded recruit, comes in, talented guy. He leaves the program. He's going to go to Nebraska now. But take us through that there, because it was sort of an odd situation. And when he left, there seemed to be some animosity. But I will say, Jim, that after he left, it seemed like they took yet another step forward. Was this addition by subtraction, or what went on with King there?
Yeah, I've always hesitated to use those. I'm just going to say that addition by subtraction thing. Let's go back to why he left in the first place. Like, I think I was as shocked as anybody that he left. I was driving down to Iowa to cover the Wisconsin-Iowa game late January, and got a text that, hey, have you heard that someone's not making the trip down? And I said, no, I haven't heard that. And, I kept driving and tried to make some calls and didn't hear anything. And then they said, it's Kobe. And I was completely shocked, that it was Kobe, because he probably would have been the second to last person I would have guessed. Brad Davison, I think, is probably the one I would have been most shocked by. But Kobe was right there. He's always seemed to be that, very happy guy. He's an in-state kid. Had spoke glowingly about this program and what it meant to be part of this program. But behind the scenes, he was very unhappy and had been for quite a while. He had a problem with Greg Gard and didn't just never felt happy. And it finally all hit a couple days earlier during a loss at Purdue, and decided that next day that he was done. He was so unhappy that he was miserable. He didn't want to go on anymore with his team, and walked away. And it was shocking. I mean, this was their second leading scorer at the time, and I thought my biggest question coming out of that was, this is a team that already has trouble scoring. How can it survive without its second leading scorer?
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, one of the few guys that can create his shots. I mean, he's a guy that could score at all three levels. It was just, I thought this was going to kind of be the thing that put this team in a slump, and the exact opposite happened. In part because the one thing I think it did is it gave everybody else more minutes and more opportunities, and guys weren't looking over their shoulders as much. Guys like Brevin Pritzel and Liam Ford knew that they could just go out there and play free because, there wasn't a guy waiting for them at the scorer's table if they messed up. And I think to Greg Gard's credit, he allowed his team to be a little bit more loose, and I think the guys played freer, they played happy, they played for each other. And that was the one thing, you never know how a team's going to react to something like this, and this team just kind of rallied around each other. I thought that was the most impressive part. They rallied around each other and their coaching staff, and just kind of became stronger because of it. And that'd have been a tough thing to predict back in late January or early February, but it certainly was the case down the stretch. I think they just kind of relied on each other and got through the stormy waters.
Yeah, Kobe King, he did play 27 minutes in that Purdue game, had 0 points. So to me, it wasn't a minutes thing. It was just one of those games, and Purdue was hot at home, and that was it. But he leaves the program. They lose a tough game at Iowa where they battled, and after that, the win over Michigan State at home, then a loss on the road at Minnesota. But after that, they rattled them off. Ohio State, Nebraska, Purdue, Rutgers, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, and Indiana, of course, with the big win away, which was really impressive. That win, I think, says a lot, Jim, about Wisconsin. On the road against Indiana, end of the year, want to get a share of the Big Ten regular season title. Assembly Hall's been extremely tough for Big Ten opponents. Big Ten teams going on the road, of course, was difficult all year. That was something we heard about national media. But to win the title on the road in a comeback at Indiana, where they've beaten really top teams there, that had to be the crown jewel of the season.
Yeah, and like you mentioned the comeback, I think that was the most impressive part, was that they were down in the second half and things just looked bleak. And this team, as it did kind of throughout that winning streak, just kind of dug in and dug down deep and found something. And you could tell there were just a couple plays that stand out that were just great effort plays. Micah Potter, going after offensive rebound and keeping a possession alive, and then kicking out to Brad Davison for a three-pointer. Some really strong defensive possessions. Because defense wasn't necessarily this team's forte. It was a pretty good statistically defense in terms of efficiency, but not a great defense by any means, not as good as it was the year before. But down the stretch, this team just kind of showed grit. And that was the one thing I think Greg Gard thought was lacking early in the season, was grit and toughness. And down the stretch, this team, just it really showed it when it needed the most. And, I've kind of gone this far without mentioning this, but the one overlying, the story theme that was kind of hanging over this team all season was that assistant coach Howard Moore and his family had gotten in a car accident last May. And, that was really kind of a dark cloud hanging over this program. Howard's wife and daughter died in the accident. Howard survived the crash, but later had a heart attack and was in really bad shape, no longer really be around the team. So I just think there was a sadness, and they wanted to rally around that storyline. They wanted to do everything they could for the Moore family. But, these are 18 to 22-year-old kids. These are coaches whose best friend is laying in a hospital, and these are coaches' wives who are close to that, Jen Moore and Jaden Moore. And they just, that was tough to get through. Even into February and March, that storyline is still there. And I think that's the thing that showed most at Bloomington. When that game was finally over, when they had won the Big Ten title, all the emotions came pouring out that they had rallied through this tremendous tragedy. Because everything else we've talked about, Kobe King leaving, Potter not being eligible, that's all minor compared to this Moore family tragedy. And I think that it all came pouring out that day that, wow, they had done this for themselves, for him. it had been a tremendous accomplishment, and it was something that nobody could take away from them.
Yeah, that's a tremendous point from that tragedy. I mean, just really rocked the team and the community. My goodness, and I'm sure with young kids and with the team there, that's going to be something that's going to linger with them. And it's just amazing that they were able to find it and come together at the end and provide some sort of light in what was really a dark start to the season. Absolutely. And it looks like here, Jim, moving forward next year, they have a strong group returning. I mean, if you look at the team that's coming back, the only one who's gone is Brevin Pritzel. Now today, Luka Garza said that he is going to declare for the draft, but he's going to retain his eligibility. So certainly, that a lot is dependent on him. But I talked to Zach Osterman from Indiana 2 days ago. He was giving a rundown, and he said he feels Wisconsin right now, moving into next year with the players returning, he sees them as the favorite. So certainly this year's success is something that could build for next year. Before we get into the recruits, let's just talk about a lot of veteran players coming back.
Yeah, I mean, really, Brevin Pritzel is going to be tough to replace. He's a good shooter, just did a little bit of everything. He's a smart player, so I don't want to minimize his departure. But you do have everybody else around him returning. And I think guys like Liam Ford and Brad Davison and Demetric Trice, those guys played their best basketball towards the end of the season, and I think they can kind of use that as a springboard. Nate Reaver should be a year older and better. Tyler Waugh, who we haven't mentioned yet, was a true freshman who played a lot of minutes last season. Yep. Even though he probably wasn't physically ready. I mean, I think a summer of weight work will be big for him, because I think he's kind of your prototypical Wisconsin player, hustle, effort, just kind of does the dirty work, and I think he's a guy that can be a really valuable contributor. Trevor Anderson's another guy who I think can help this team. So they do have almost everybody back, and like you mentioned, a pretty good recruiting class coming in where you can maybe fill some of those holes that Pritzel leaves behind.
Yeah, they have a solid recruiting class coming in, and what Greg Gard has done is he's really lined it up for the next few years. Right now on 24/7 Sports, their recruiting class for the 2021 season is number 1 in the Big Ten. They have some hard commits there as well, but for next year, they have Ben Carlson coming in, who's a 4-star guy from Minnesota. Johnny Davis is a local guy, 3-star Lauren Bowman. So talk about these guys coming in. It looks like, that they're really going to be deep next year. I think, Jim, that not only are they going to have veteran leadership, not only are they going to have balance between guards and the bigs inside, but they're going to come back from a regular season Big Ten title with a strong recruiting class as well.
Yeah, the thing it does, at the very least, I don't know, I can't sit here today and say who's going to get what minutes, but the thing at the very least it does is that it fills out the roster. And that's one thing that this team struggled with last year was they had a hard time practicing because they only had, at one point they only had 8 scholarship players after Kobe King left, and guys on the scout team were injured. A couple of their assistant coaches who had practiced with the team were injured. So they had a hard time doing full practices because you just didn't have a scout team to go against. So I think getting these there's 5 scholarship guys and a really good walk-on coming in. It makes it a deeper practice roster at the very least. And then I think a couple of guys have a chance to play early. I think Johnny Davis is a really good, wing-type player who, again, this program has been kind of lacking the guy that can get to the basket and create his own shot. I think Johnny Davis is a guy who in time can do that. He doesn't mind playing defense, a very athletic guy. I think he's a guy that can step on the floor and help out in some way immediately. You mentioned Carlson. I think Carlson, too, is a guy that can maybe give you a little something early on. I don't know how the rotation in the front court is going to work next year, but I think Carlson is a guy that'll probably be ready to play immediately. Lauren Bowman is they really like him as a point guard. He's a guy that, again, can score on all 3 levels, good at distributing, tough, good defensively. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him, get some minutes as a true freshman. And then, Johnny Davis's twin brother Jordan is a guy that they view as kind of a 3-and-D guy in time, a very good defender who, can contribute at some point. And then Stephen Crowell, who's, almost 7 foot. I went and watched him play last year during a trip to Minnesota, and he was a little skinny but very skilled, and I think in time he's going to be a good player too. So, yeah, the future looks really bright. And it's funny because last spring this program was getting criticized for its lack of recruiting. There was a big recruiting drought. And then the Davis brothers committed in June, and from there it just kind of took off. They got 8 commitments in a span of 3 or 4 months, and some of those 2021 guys you're talking about are included in that haul. And it was kind of amazing how Greg Gard and his staff flipped the switch and and went from drought to really a great haul over the span of 2 classes.
Well, listen, they are certainly solved that perceived issue. They are a team that is going to be deep. They have strong players coming back. And even though this season, obviously, for all of us in college basketball, didn't end the way that we wanted it to be, the Badgers look prime and ready next year to have a big, big season with a lot coming back. Folks, Jim Polzin, can't thank him enough. Covers Wisconsin men's basketball for the Wisconsin State Journal. Must follow on Twitter at Jim Polzin, WSJ. Jim, we thank you for a few minutes here. Wisconsin really made some inroads, had one of the best wins of the year in college basketball, winning at Assembly Hall to get that much-needed Big Ten regular season championship with all the stuff that they went through. So it looks like, hopefully we'll be talking again next year. There will be a season, let's think positive, and we'll be looking towards Wisconsin Badger basketball for next year as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.